2. All right, so I'm going to share my screen with you, and I'm going to have a few introductory slides. I'll get rid of this, and we'll start with a few introductory slides, and then I'm going to turn it over to you, Tony. And what I'll do, Tony, so that you know, I have your slides, your most recent slide deck. At least I hope I have the most recent slide deck, and I'll move the slides for you. So when you want to get to the next page, you just say next slide, and eventually I'll figure it out. And you probably won't need to say that. So you're going to have to hear from me for about 5 or 6 minutes as an intro. And somehow on Eventbrite, they said this was a 4-hour webinar. It is not. We hope to get you out of here in 60 or 70 minutes.
Oh, good.
You know, it could last 90 minutes, but it won't last longer than that. I apologize that was a mistake on Eventbrite. We just mucked up again. So it's about a 90-minute webinar, maybe a little bit less, and you're going to hear from me for a few minutes, and then Tony. One thing that I asked Tony, and he agreed, if you have any questions at all, please put them in the chat box. I'm the host, and I'll keep my eye on the chat box. I can see we've got a few messages there already. And Tony's okay if I just kind of put up my hand and say we got a question here from Jake, and we'll kind of interrupt him, so it makes it a little bit more of a conversation. I find Zoom is a pretty good learning tool, but it's not quite the same as if we were all in a classroom together and we could chat together, and there'd be crosstalk amongst the students here today. So I do think in-person events are probably a little bit better for this kind of thing, but this is a very close substitute. And given the fact that we're all over in the States and in Canada, it's the only way, really. All right, so my slide deck, which is only 8 or 9 slides, is how to find smoking hot real estate deals. I get asked this all the time by the people I coach and the people I work with. And what I'd ask people to do is, would you mind, folks, muting yourself if you don't mind? Just if the dog is barking or somebody's got some feedback like we had a moment ago, just Ryan, you can see that, just to mute yourself. And if you want to talk, you can, but preferably, I think, just put a question in the chat box, and I'll interrupt and talk to it. And that's another problem. I mean, in a classroom, you put up your hand, everybody sees that, and it's a little easier, but we'll make do. So how to find smoking hot real estate deals, even in a very hot market. Now, the markets are cooling off in the States and Canada. There's no doubt about that. But anyway, there you go. All right, so this is a recorded webinar, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about how I've been finding smoking hot deals over a career that spans now more than 40 years. This one is something that goes back about 30 years now, when I was looking for a site to build the Canadian Tire Center. Just before we started this recording, I mentioned a little bit more about myself, and I'm the founder of the Ottawa Centers, and this is one of the buildings that we built. The original plan, as you can see it on the top right-hand side of the screen, what we actually built is a little bit different, and that's not unusual in real estate development. The difference between the architect's plans and the built form, the as-builts, are usually quite remarkable. And so if you're ever doing a project like this of your own and you're developing something, make sure you have the original architecture plans, but also the as-builts, so that, because what you build is actually always a little bit different, and sometimes quite a lot different. So how do you find smoking hot deals? The land that I bought, you can see it on the screen here. I bought 600 acres around in the west end of Ottawa, which is the capital of Canada, for around $12,000 an acre, about $7.2 million. And it's now trading at between 1.1 and 1.2 million an acre. Mind you, that's a generation later, but you can see that it's gone from 12,000 an acre to 1.1 or 1.2 million an acre. That's quite a rise. And rumor has it that now that the trades, the more recent trades, are going to come in at over $2 million. So that's a pretty good result. If you sort of think about it, making $1 million an acre times 600 acres, that works up to $600 million. It's real money. And basically what I did here was I didn't find it. I actually keep in touch with the local real estate scene. And back in the day, you would read the newspaper. Today, it'd be more social than anything else, but you keep in touch with the local newspaper and, of course, the local news. however you get it. And in this case, it turns out that this 600 acres was actually optioned by the Central Canada Exhibition Association for new fairgrounds. 600 acres. And as soon as I read that in the local newspaper, I went out and had a look at it. I said, oh my gosh, this is a perfect site for what we were then calling the Palladium, now Canadian Tire Center. And I was kicking myself that I didn't beat them to it. And then about 6 or 8 weeks later, the association announces that they've given up their options on the land. Within 2 hours, myself and Jim Steele, who worked with me at the time, were in farmhouses, you know, buying the options from the farmers. And I don't drink very much, but it was, I remember 10 or 11 o'clock in the morning, going into a farmhouse, talking to the local farmer, asking him if he would be interested in selling his or her property. And he'd always offer me a rye. So, you know, when you're trying to buy property, you know, you drink a little bit of rye. And the business model for this was we only needed 100 acres for the actual building, but we wanted to buy 600. 500 additional acres. And the thought was, if you put an NHL team, a major community facility, an arena or stadium, in the middle of your land assembly, the value will go up. And that's what happened. So sometimes you find smoking hot deals just by being in touch with the local scene. This is quite a different scale. This is a client of mine, a young man, he's 29 years of age, who bought this building on the top right of the screen on the left-hand side here. And you can see it had a couple of commercial spaces that were vacant, and it had, I think, 2 apartments up here. And he bought this in a small town, I think it's fewer than 10,000 people, and you can see the purchase price on the screen, $132,500. Not very much money. And then he put in about $167,000 in renovations. He added a patio, he did some painting, and he added one more unit. So one of the things we talked about was making the commercial space smaller, which might make it a little bit more leasable, and putting a unit at grade in the back. So you could have a live-work condition. Somebody could live in the back and have some kind of a business in front. And that's in fact what happened. He ended up with an apartment in the back where a guy lives, and he runs the Prescott laundromat. So his total cost was $300,000. It was reappraised, didn't take him long. It was like within a year, I think he got it reappraised for 600 grand. He put a new mortgage in place and took out $150,000 in tax-free cash in less than 24 months. I think it was less than 15 months. So it's a pretty good result for a 29-year-old, or for that matter, a 70-year-old. And what did he look for? How did he find that smoking hot deal? What he did was he did a lot of work on MLS or realtor.ca or realtor.com, and he was looking for aging listings. So a lot of people say, oh, MLS, if you get a deal on MLS, it's too late. Not necessarily. If you look for days on market, you can filter on that basis, you can search on that basis. And in this case, it had more than 300 days on market. So the listing was aging. So now you have a motivated seller. And in addition to that, he also had a business model. Most people think business models are only for tech companies, but they're not. Real estate too. And his idea was to create a live-work condition and a mixed use, right? A little bit of commercial and some residential. Worked out real well. Yeah, okay. So here's another one. This is, again, quite different. I've got about 1,000 of them, but I'm only going to show you 3. This one's in Kanata, which is in the west end of Ottawa on Akins Road. It's literally a 2-acre industrial site in the middle of nowhere. You can sort of see on the picture on the screen that all around this place is nothing but fields. It's 8 or 10 minutes away from the nearest house. So it's really literally in the middle of nowhere. It's a 17 or 18,000 square foot industrial building with, you can sort of see up here, if you squint at your screen, a coverall building. So there are 2 coveralls on that, and you can't see here, there's also an old farmhouse. And I really like this property. And how did we find this smoking hot deal? This was simply a drive-by. Just people who can see opportunity were driving by, i.e. me, and say, oh, I wonder, you know, this has been for sale for a long time. I wonder what could be done with it. So now you're looking for property that, just as you're driving through your town in Syracuse or wherever you happen to live, you're going to see opportunity. And part of this webinar is to train you to see that sort of stuff. So this particular building was, I think, more than 400 days on the market. It was a substandard industrial building in the fact that I think it only had 10'2" ceiling height. Most industrial buildings have to have 18 or 20 or 24 feet. If you're building a 1 million square foot fulfillment center for Amazon or Wayfair, they want 60 feet clear height. So this only has 10 feet 2 inches. So nobody wanted to buy it. And it was being sold by a big HVAC company. So there was a very motivated seller. They had outgrown this building. They had built a brand new, much bigger, much better facility. And they were asking almost $1 million for it, 990,000. And I talked to 3 of my clients. I said, you guys should buy this. It was Chris and Mark and Warren. And they said, oh, not for 990,000. And what are we going to do? If we buy it for almost $1 million and it's empty, you know, where are we going to find somebody who wants a relatively large industrial space to take over a substandard space? And I said, that's not the model here. We probably have a motivated vendor, which we did. It's large number of days on the market, which is good. But I was working on another business model, which is micro workshops. This is even before the pandemic began. Micro workshops are super hot. So many people in the States and in Canada are now transitioning out of the job, out of a job, and they're starting some kind of side hustle or gig. And I've got a building like this myself, and it's very successful with workshops that are as small as 200 square feet, 400, 600, 800, maybe the largest one I have is 1,000 square feet. So anyway, we put in an offer for this place at $250,000. And the large company just really wanted to get it off its books, and they accepted the offer. Then we did renos. They did renos of about $600,000, and they created, as you can see here, lots and lots of these little workshops. This one is probably only about 300 or 400 square feet. It has an overhead door. It has a man door or person door here, and they just filled up this building. It didn't take very long. You probably can't see, but that actually is my for lease sign in front of the building, and it just filled up. And in commercial appraisals for properties like this, most of the appraisers are now using an income basis to appraise a property. So they look at what is your net operating income, what is the applicable cap rate. They divide the net operating income by the applicable fair market value cap rate. They get a value, and this came at 2.3 million. And so when you go from maybe a total investment of 850 to about 2.3 million, and that took about 3 or 4 years, that is a future shaping kind of deal. That is, you know, you're making $1.5 million in 2 or 3 years. It's hard to save that, you know, from your salary. So investing is probably the only way most of us can actually make any money. But they wouldn't sell it for 2.3 million. If they sold it, I asked them, would you guys ever sell it? They said, yeah, for 4 million. So the appraised value was very good, but the actual fair market value might actually be higher. So that, yeah. So how did we find that? This one was simply a drive-by and paying attention to what you're seeing around you. All right. So what would Sherlock Holmes do if I challenged him how to find smoking hot deals? Well, you kind of gathered all of my knowledge already, which is you're looking for aging listings, painstaking research. I have a researcher who works for me. Her name is Dawn. She's my wife as well. She is actually trained biosciences researcher, so she's very, very patient. But she puts in endless hours looking for properties of a certain type on MLS, on Kijiji, on Craigslist, on Loopnet. She knows what to look for. She's very good at searching and using the different filters, and she can find properties. It's truly amazing. So you have to be patient. You know, you can't just sort of say, I want somebody to help me with this. You got to do it yourself. I wish realtors, and I am a real estate broker, I wish realtors would do more. But, you know, you have to do it yourself in most cases, all right? And then we talked about maybe you find something by driving by, you have local knowledge, develop your local knowledge, you keep your eye on social and mainstream media, and you have to be able to see opportunities. In other words, you have to have a business model. You don't just buy a piece of real estate, whether it's a piece of land, a residential building, you know, industrial building, whatever, without having a plan, a business model, all right? All right, so the other thing that I put on here next to Mr. Sherlock Holmes there is you also have to have a great team around you. So I find that there are deal-making types of people and there are deal-breaking types of people. And I have around me, and you need a team around you of deal-making realtors, mortgage brokers, deal-making lawyers, lenders, appraisers, not deal-breaking ones, all right? So if you have people who are not helping you achieve your objectives, replace them. I'm going to put this in the chat box once my friend there, Tony, Tony, stand by, you're on in a minute. I have I think I put 31 tips on how to buy low, even in hot markets. And there's a Dropbox link here. You can download it for free. It's not very long. It's maybe 10 pages long. And it just might help you sort of with some of the ideas that I've talked about a little bit here already. So I'll put that in the chat box in a minute. And today, what I'm excited about is that I've done quite a bit of buying below market myself, but most of it is kind of by luck or just coincidence, and I guess that's luck too. And what Tony has done is he's created a system to find properties that are 20 or 25% below market. And then he's got a second step in that, which is to get appraisers to give him the fair market value. It's great if you could buy a property 20% below market. I've done that. I don't have a system to do it, but I've done it through hard work. But then getting an appraiser to give you an appraisal that isn't 20% below market too is not easy. And Tony has found out how to do that. So I'm really looking forward to thinking different with Tony, how to systematically, consistently over a period of years. And he's a young man, but he's been doing it for 20 years, how to consistently do it. I'm really looking forward to it. And we're going to learn a lot today. And no, this is my introduction for Tony. He's a young looking 40-something. But he's been at it for a long time. He's been doing the Burr thing, 5,000 plus doors already. That's pretty good. That's a lot of doors. He's been renovating and rehabbing mostly medium to large multifamily buildings, 30 units or bigger. He's got a true passion, you'll notice that yourselves, for all things real estate. And as I mentioned, he's been at it for 20 years. He's been doing it in the States and in Canada. He's built MG Real Estate Investments as an equity real estate investment firm focused on creating cash flowing properties. That I think is really important. I'm not interested in, nor is Tony, and none of you should be, in buying properties with very low cap rates, no cash flow, or a negative cash flow, hoping that next year the property will be worth more. You hope the property will be worth more, but it's a hell of a lot easier to hold on to property as long as you don't have to reach into your pocket every month to subsidize it. So I don't want to do that. And he had founded MG Real Estate Investments to allow others to invest and grow with them if they would like to participate with him. So kind of that's where we're at. That's my introduction. Went on a little longer than it probably should have. But Tony, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here, Bruce.
All right. So I'm going to share my screen again, but I'm going to share your slides instead of mine. Just give me 1 second here and we'll transition to you. And there we are. Can you see the screen, Tony?
Yeah, I can see it. Can everybody else see it?
I'll get it a full screen here in a second.
All right.
Full screen mode. There we are. Okay. Over to you, Tony.
Awesome. Thank you for the opportunity and the introduction. And thank you to everybody who took the time on Saturday to join. And I'm blessed to be able to share this knowledge with everybody. So as you noticed when we created the link, we had on there how we closed on $369,000 in equity gains. But since we created that link, we've closed on new properties. And so now in the last 6 months, that brings us to about $500,000 in equity gains. And what that means is the properties that we've been getting have been so far under the appraised value that we've made $500,000 just for buying properties. So we're getting paid to buy properties in a lot of these situations. Yeah, can we go to the next slide, please? So today I'll explain who I am, our process for finding deals, and how that evolved into our new strategy. With the increase in interest rates, there's been a lot of pivoting happening, and so we've had to pivot along with that, but it's actually created a lot of opportunity for us and our investors. So we'll touch on that and get into the meat and potatoes of how we came into these equity deals and how everybody else can eventually do it if they put in the work, or join us if they're interested. Next slide, please. So where do I begin? So school just didn't work out for me as a kid. I had tons of energy and classrooms couldn't contain me. I'm kind of like a bull in a china shop. And so school just didn't work out for me. And when I left there, I was about 16 years old. I found myself swinging a hammer on a job site and got a lot of practical knowledge when I was an apprentice carpenter. And during that time, I was looking around at all these projects that we were working on and thinking, how much I'd love to start flipping houses and get into business. And so shortly thereafter, I went through a period where I got into a lot of trouble that followed me into my late 20s. But during that time as well, I also managed to get into flipping houses. And once I put all the trouble behind me, I pursued the flipping full time. And so fast forward today, we've been hired as a general contractor to renovate over 5,000 apartment units. So being hired to do a Burr style renovation on 160 units at a time, 70 units, that sort of thing. And been built and sold as a developer dozens of homes on the west side of Vancouver. And actually, this building that you see me standing in front of, we bought that about 20 years ago. And even though I was in real estate this whole time, I didn't even know about real estate investing. Rich Dad, Poor Dad, the internet, all that stuff wasn't really around back then. And so this is a building that we bought. We held it for a year and we sold it for maybe $100,000 profit or something. That's in Scarborough, Ontario. And back then we bought it for around $2 million. Today they're trading at 300 grand a door. So if I had held it and done the Burr strategy for the long term, that would be a $9 million building today in our portfolio. So looking at retroactively what we've learned in the past is hold these things for the long term, refinance them, and raise the values through raising rents and strategic renovations. Next slide, please. So that's a little bit about my background. Oh, right here. So these are some of the buildings that we renovated, 161 units, 77 unit complex there. These are examples of houses that we developed, knocked down a house, tore down a house, and built a new house and sold, all on the west side of Vancouver. And actually, on that note, so when I still look at the municipal assessments, and all these houses today in today's value are over $5, $6, $7 million.
Wow.
And back then they were just $1 million homes. So if we had done, the Burr, where we built it, we put a few basement suites and that sort of thing, and cash flowed and held it for the long term, I'd own dozens of houses in the $5 million range right now. So everything we've done has taught us that we need to be holding these assets for the long term. Next slide, please. So I do a lot of sports, surfing, snowmobiling, sailboat captain, all kinds of stuff. And that's what I do in my free time. So next slide. So that's a look on my face when my team sends me a notification that we got another deal under contract, because we're getting these things at 14 to 37% below the appraised value. And again, I know we've said it a million times, but that means we're closing with no down payment, making money on the buy. And in some cases, the bank is actually paying us. One that we recently did, we got paid $100,000 in addition to the purchase price. So imagine that. Normally when you go into the bank, they're asking you, where's your down payment coming from? Now, when we're getting deals like this, we're going to the banks and saying, okay, how much are you going to pay us to close on this? So that's the value.
I haven't seen deals like this, Tony, since the 1980s. And
Right.
in the 1980s, you probably had a negative age.
Right. So, and on that note, we were doing this all through the bidding wars, and
unbelievable.
All of our deals we did conditional offers on with $1,000 deposits, some of them maybe $3,000 deposits, but yeah. And actually my lead sales guy and some of our team members are on the call today. Maybe they can touch on that later.
Okay.
So yeah, next slide, please. So I'm just going to go through a case study of what we were doing during the hot market. And this is a deal we did in Tennessee. I'm going to transition into what we're doing today in Ontario and BC, but this gives a good example of what we were doing. So our whole thing is marketing to off-market sellers, and there's a variety of ways to get in touch with them through sending yellow letters to their houses, door knocking, bandit signs, Google AdWords, Facebook. So there's a whole bunch of different types of strategies to try to get in front of these sellers. And what worked for us in the US was there's a tool called PropStream. And we can go into PropStream and filter out a neighborhood of houses. It'll give us all the addresses filtered by, say, houses under 300,000 with absentee owners who are over the age of 65. And this is great because it tells us there's a vacant house there, the landlord lives out of state, and he's probably getting to retirement age. So we know there could be some motivation. Then what we do is we upload that list to Batch Leads. Batch Leads takes different data points from the internet and skip traces their phone numbers, so we can actually call these sellers. Then we put those phone numbers into Mojo, which is a 3-line dialer. And what it does is it dials 3 lines at a time. And so we have guys like Mike, who's on the call today, who sit on the phones calling sellers and asking them if they're interested in selling. And then we have a whole sales process where that we run them through to qualify if they truly are our type of seller. And what I've had a lot of luck with is I've hired VAs in the Philippines, South America, all over, and there's always a bit of a language and cultural barrier. And I find when VAs, foreign VAs are talking to sellers, sometimes there's trust issues. So the gold is there's expats that live all over the world, Colombia, Brazil, and they're Americans, Canadians, and they are looking for work. And so we've hired people down there. And actually Mike's an American, a war veteran and a military guy who lives in Brazil, and he's from America, and he's one of our lead sales guys. And he's on the call today. So next slide, please. So this is an example of a deal we did in Tennessee. And this one was an off-market deal from a seller. This came through, it was on a list of inheritance. I forget what that's called, but when we filter it, what's it called when it goes to a probate list. So this one came from a probate list. This house, the parents had died, and there was 3 siblings who inherited it. All of the siblings were estranged. None of them could get along and talk to each other. And so it sat for 10 years as a liability. And for them to sell it on MLS, they would have had to all coordinate. And that was nearly impossible to get them to all coordinate in one spot. So my job was to track down, and one of them was out of state. So the house and the 2 sellers were in Tennessee, and the other seller was in Alabama. He was an estranged half-brother. So I had to skip trace him, find him, send a notary out to him to get the document signed and coordinate everything. So this is an example of how we were able to help a seller who they couldn't have put it on MLS because they couldn't coordinate between them and there was infighting. So by solving sellers' problems, we're able to help them achieve a sale that they couldn't achieve on MLS.
I think that's exactly right, Tony. I'm sure everybody on the call today knows that the worst fights are the intra-family fights. When sisters and brothers start to see dollar signs, they often can become just completely irrational. And also, there's realtors on this call, and they know that to put something that looks like this on MLS, there's all kinds of disclosures that have to be made, which if you could get everybody around the table to sign all the required documents to put it on MLS, the disclosures would really be a drag on the ability to sell this.
Right, that's a good point. And so it's funny too, because the lady, the executor on the will, always said, oh, my brother's like, it's so difficult. And when I finally tracked down the brother, he was actually the easiest to deal with. So like sometimes you get into the process and the sellers are telling you one thing, but you really have to look to figure out what the problem is so you can solve it. And by solving the problem, we were able to get it under contract. And I believe we got it under contract for $40,000, and I think we wholesaled it around 75,000. And then the guy who bought it off of us did a $20,000-$30,000 renovation, and his value was 200,000. So before the interest rate hikes that happened, we were wholesaling deals. We were assigning deals out, but you know, this is a case study of what we were doing before. Do you want to go to the next slide? Does anybody have any questions about our marketing or anything that is it okay if I take questions?
Of course. I'm monitoring the chat box.
Okay.
And there is one question here from Colette. In Canada, if you know the owner of a home, is there a way to find their phone number, Tony?
Yeah, so in Canada, we have privacy. In US, they have the freedom of information, which makes it easy to get in touch with them. But in Canada, I haven't figured out a way. So, you know, if I see a house that I really want to go after, you know what never fails? Like, because you see the house and you see that it's in bad shape and they might want to sell, go put a bandit sign up on a pole really high up above so nobody can take it down. And most of the time they will call you.
I do exactly that. And I also will just go knock on the door, Tony. Colette, I'm not shy. And, you know, I'll see, like I'm trying to buy a vacant plaza now. So not a vacant home, but there's a plaza that I've got my eye on. It's 100% vacant. I mean, I don't tell everybody that during the pandemic, retailers really took it in the ear. And, you know, so that was just a drive-by. And then I looked up title. Found the name of the owner, and I'm reaching out to the owner. Would you like to sell it?
Right. What I like is putting up some kind of marketing, because when they reach out to door knocking is great, but you got to have a thick skin.
You do.
So outbound marketing can somehow generate them to contact you by marketing to them. I find they're coming to you warm, and it's but certainly outbound marketing and door knocking is a great way too. Yep. Do we want to go to the next slide? This is just sort of the numbers and the way it looked, but I already talked about that. Maybe we can go to the next slide, please. So that's what we were doing. It was just so easy. Every deal that we had under contract at that time for the last couple of years was just flying off the shelves because it was a very hot market. And during that time, we were acquiring BRRRR projects, but just very slowly and little by little, and not putting too much emphasis. But you know, going forward, because the market for flipping isn't as hot, we're just going full in on the BRRRR strategy, which is closing on these properties and increasing the value through strategic renovations and refinancing based on a cap rate. So our exit strategies are not determined by residential home sales. The market can fall another 25%, and our appraisals still stand, and our lenders are still good to refinance us at the end. So we're getting to take advantage of the soft market where sellers are now like really you know, looking to make deals and not on such a high horse like they were maybe 3 months ago, and we're getting even better deals, but we're able to not worry about the market falling because we're refinancing on income and expenses and cap rates. Should we go to the next slide, please? So yeah, more of the same. We've built in $503,000 in equity on the buy of the recent properties that we closed on, and all of them we've closed with no cash down. So next slide, please. So starting with Brantford, Ontario, next slide, please. I'll run us through one of the deals we recently closed on. This was a seller who came through our pipeline. He contacted us and he had a unique set of circumstances. And this is a single family home that's zoned to have 3 kitchens. So one upstairs, one downstairs, and one in the coach house. This also came with a shop that was grandfathered in, and because it's grandfathered in, it was actually, we just got the permit back yesterday, to begin construction out in the coach house. So it was very easy to add value to this property. And we purchased this one for $750, and the appraised value at the time was $868,000, which means there was $118,000 below the appraised value. So we were able to close with, my mortgage broker gave us 100% financing on this deal, and we closed with no down payment and made $118,000 on the buy. It needed just a new roof. It was in very good condition. The seller had been working on it himself for a lot of years. So we just put a new roof on it for $4,000 and a kitchen in the basement. And the appraiser came back 25 days later and approved the new appraisal of $960,000. So that's $210,000 of equity that we created in under 25 days with very little money down. I mean, we spent maybe 20-30,000 on the renovation total by the very end of it, and it was really quick. So
there's a question here which I completely agree with, and this is, I don't have a process like yours. I'm learning now how you systematize it, Tony, and I'm absolutely in awe of what you do. But the missing link for me is the second part. And we just got a question which was in my mind too, and that is, for example, clients of mine just bought 106 acres of industrial land for $5.1 million, and it was definitely under the market. It was like $48,000 an acre, and the market for land in that area is over 100,000. So they basically brought it half price, which is fantastic. But when we went to get the appraisal done, the appraiser said, yeah, but he gave them like 5.3 million. So he gave them like $200,000 above what their purchase price is. And that sounds like a lot of money, but on 5.1 million, it's not a whole lot. So how do you get an appraiser to say, well, yeah, I know it's probably worth 960, but you only pay 750. So my appraisal is going to come in at the lesser of the fair market value or what you paid for it. That's what I hear all the time, and I'm sure other people are facing the same problem.
Right. So that's where having a team is key. And so we are vetting our appraisers. I mean, to get to the 2 appraisers we're using in Southern Ontario right now, actually 3, I had to say no and fire countless. I can't even count how many of them. You can generally tell right away. I can tell when they show up, but by what they're saying, if we're going to get along or if it's going to go well or not. So it's just a matter of interviewing them and finding out if they're on the same page, and they have to be in agreement or in line with your lenders too. So these are appraisers that our lender gave us. So they have a list, and we went down the list. And
so what Tony is saying, everybody, is that he's not just getting some random appraiser to give him an appraisal. It has to be an appraiser who's on the approved list by the lender, because if you use an appraiser who's not on the approved list, the lender will say, well, wait, we don't work with Bill Smith or Jane Joe, right? We just don't do that. You have to have somebody on the list. But what I think Tony said that's really important is that people on this call should be using the 2 words that Donald Trump used to use when he was a reality TV star, and that is, you're fired. And I completely agree with that. And I've taught my clients to do it, and I'm doing it now more myself. And I learned it too late in life, Tony, but but if I don't think an appraiser's on the same wavelength, I'll literally fire him at the door. And
Yeah.
I'll give you an example. One of my clients, a young fellow in his 30s, Alex, had a beautiful, beautiful executive home on a large lot, and he had built himself a coach house. For those of you who, it's an ADU, an accessory dwelling unit, but it was a beautiful coach house and a workshop in his backyard. So he had this beautiful house, and he runs a company called All Around Fencing, so decks and fences. So he had this beautiful workshop and this fabulous accessory residential unit or coach house. I don't know how many bedrooms, really 2 or 3. In his backyard. The appraiser shows up and says, "Oh, no, I can't appraise any outbuildings." Now, Tony, what would you say to that appraiser when he says he won't look at the coach house and the workshop in the backyard?
Well, it's funny you mentioned that, because the appraiser who appraised this, when I mentioned it, I could actually see her body language go, like, she was not comfortable with it. And because it's a new thing and there's not a lot of comparables. But then I said to her, what if we look at the income? Well, first I talked to my lender, the mortgage broker, and I said, can we use the income approach? And came back to her and asked her, okay, can you do, once he approved, I went back to her and she said, oh yeah, no problem. We can do,
That's good.
base it on income and expenses. So she's not comparing it against other sales, other residential sales in the area.
I really like it. And so what, just to underline what Tony just said, if you can convince your appraiser not to use comparables, because I mean, think about that example I gave about young Alex, who had this beautiful home, a workshop, and a coach house in his backyard. There aren't a lot of properties like that out there, which you could say, well, yeah, those have sold. It's not like a bungalow in a little suburb, and there's 10 bungalows that have been sold within the last 6 months and within a few blocks, that you can use comparables for that. But if you have something like this, and you can get the appraiser right off the bat to agree to use an income approach, then you're probably going to get something great. But what Tony didn't say is what Alex said to the guy who showed up and wouldn't appraise the outbuildings. You're fired. And he went shopping for another appraiser. We also have Michael, who's from affordableapartments.ca, in the call with us today. And he does something I'm not sure I would do it, but I don't think it's a bad idea. Tony, what he'll do is he'll get 3 appraisers, and he'll set them all going on the same thing, and it'll take the best of the appraisers.
I've done that too. I've certainly done that. Yeah, for
There
sure.
you go. And I think we had one more question, I think, from Nitesh, which I think you're going to get to. I know this is from Pierce.
Right.
Pierce, just be patient, because Tony's definitely going to get this. The question that Pierce has for you, Tony, is what's your strategy to make sure that these properties cash flow? And he does put in brackets there, are you doing short-term rentals, an Airbnb or Verbo listing? One of the things you guys have to be careful of, and I've just ran afoul of that myself, is I have a 12-plex where I have, I think, 3 units on Airbnb, and the appraiser and I fought like heck. He would not include any of our Airbnb income as regular income. He said, that's a business income, I'm dismissing that, which really affects downwardly the appraised value. So we'll come back to that, Tony.
So my on that note, my appraiser, she said, if you rent to an Airbnb arbitrager, somebody who rents from you and does the Airbnb, and you have a lease in place with them, she can accept that. Or like if I have a lease in place with them, she can accept that. So that's a way to yeah.
That's a really good point that Tony made. I messed up, Tony. I rented the 3 apartments that we put on Airbnb to my wife. Maybe that was the first clue.
Right. Right.
So I think Tony's approach is better, everybody.
Okay, so next slide, please. Oh, I saw a comment, just to touch on it. I saw a comment, somebody said, are you noticing appraisers becoming more picky? So I will say that that 960 appraisal came in. We've been waiting for permits for the coach house construction for about 2 months now, and it just came in yesterday. That appraisal was done. The 960 was based on residential, and it was done about 2 months ago. And so she said if she had to redo the appraisal, she would have to do a 7% negative time adjustment. So it would have gone down to 890. So we are seeing appraisals go down, but we have an answer to that. We have a way to, I guess, have it not affect us in our exit strategy when we're going on the income and expense approach. Okay, so the location is Brantford, Ontario, and for those of you that don't know, it's about 20 or 30 minutes from Hamilton, Ontario, which is part of the GTA. And you know, people do, the tenant we have, one of the tenants we have in there right now, he commutes to Hamilton every day. So it is a strong rental market and a great place to do this. Next slide, please. So how we were able to help this seller, these deals don't just like fall out of the sky. This guy called us and he said, I just bought a house in Costa Rica. I have, I don't know if it was $40,000 or $60,000 deposit on his property in Costa Rica. And if I don't have that, it closes in 3 weeks, they're not willing to extend. I'm going to lose my $60,000 deposit down there if I don't get a quick sale. So we had 3 weeks. He wanted a firm offer. And there was also another factor too, was he had been working on the house himself. And when you're living in a construction site and working on it, upgrading it, a lot of sellers get to the point where they've just had enough. They run out of money, they run out of energy, things change. So he had got it to where all of the walls were up, but they all needed to be skim coated, plastered, sanded, painted on 2,000 square feet of walls. That's a lot of work to do, but not a lot of materials. So the guy just had, and it needed a roof. So just a few little things. He wouldn't have been able to do in time to get it on MLS and get that sale all in time for closing on his other property. So for him, it made more sense to sell to us for what he thought was $100,000 less than the appraised value, because he would have paid $60,000. I think can we mute everybody, please?
Oh, okay. Is it a 3-point shootout now?
Is it possible to mute this?
No, at 2 o'clock.
Try and figure out who it is. Just give me a second.
All right.
Just bear with me.
I think it's TH.
Yeah, I think so too. Sorry about that.
Yeah, no worries. So what was I gonna say? Where was I? The roof and okay. Oh, and the other thing too was he wanted a $10,000 upfront cash loan on a promissory note. I don't know what he needed to do. I think he needed to buy can we mute that, please?
I'm trying to find who it is, and here it is.
Starts with the name.
Yeah, I've got him.
Yeah. All right. So the guy needed a $10,000 loan on a promissory note, and even when I went to closing, my lawyers, my insurance people, I got phone calls from everybody involved in the deal saying, "Did you lend this guy 10 grand cash? Why would you lend him 10 grand cash?" They thought I was crazy, but like in the grand scheme of things, we got the house for $118,000 below appraised value, so it made sense. So these are all just ways that when we're connecting with sellers, if you're door knocking them or you're getting in front of them, you're asking questions and trying to figure out how can we help this guy better than if he was to sell on MLS. Yeah, so that was his motivation. Next one. So this here is the shop in the back that's legally zoned for a coach house. Okay, so this thing is about 800 square feet. It's got a new roof, great foundation. It's got HVAC. This guy was using this as his shop. I guess he had a pool table and he would hang out in there. So he really got it quite clear. It has water, it has power, HVAC, all that stuff, and it's legally grandfathered in for a coach house. So I saw the numbers right away as soon as this came across our desk. So can we go to the next slide, please? So this is part of the process to get construction financing for the construction of the auxiliary dwelling unit or the coach house. was we have to get a builder's quote and a hypothetical as complete appraisal for once it's done. And to what Bruce said earlier, the appraiser, I mean, she was not comfortable with using the typical approach of comparing other residential home sales, because there's really no home sales in that area with a house like ours and a coach house. So the lender, my mortgage broker, actually told me, why don't you look at the income approach? And so what is that? That's based on income and expenses. And based on the income approach, we have this is what we're aiming for, is this $1.4 million as complete appraisal. I think he's unmuted again. Yeah, so we bought for $750. We're investing $250 into renovations, and we're refining based on income and expenses at $1.4 million. So that's a $400,000 lift or forced appreciation, and it's not based on comparable home sales. So if the market fell, I've confirmed with if the residential market keeps going down even by 25%, my appraiser has confirmed that as long as we can generate the incomes we projected, that this thing still stands, this appraisal. And my lender has also confirmed, or the mortgage broker has confirmed, that he'll accept it. So
you can see, everybody, that how important what Tony started out with, which is to buy property that's cash flowing and then animated. So animation is a word I use. A lot of you know that word on adding revenue streams, additional revenue streams. There's not a whole lot on the cost side that we can do to, we can't reduce property taxes, insurance is hard to reduce much, but we can increase revenues, not just by Airbnb, but by doing things like Tony was talking about, which is adding a coach house here.
Right. Awesome. So actually, I have to give credit where it's due. And this is a design that we used a model of something that Bruce had done at another property. So Bruce is an expert and at what's called animating, which is adding income streams to properties. And we took a page out of his book, and this is what we're building here. So as you can see, there's 2 front doors. And this thing can be run as either a 2-bedroom, 1 house, 2 bedrooms, or if you notice, there's a door that connects the 2 suites. Now, if that door gets closed, it's right next to the entry door. If that door gets closed, what we've done is we've put a wet bar in the one bedroom, which can be turned into a bachelor. Now that bachelor can be rented on Airbnb or for short-term rental, and it is a small space and all that, but people coming for Airbnb and that sort of thing on a short-term basis, it's almost by design that it's smaller, so it's not meant for somebody to dig in and stay for a long time, but we can rent these 2 separately, or we can rent them as one, and it gives us a lot of options.
Tony, can I share the original design with everybody?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll just take a moment, because this was done by a young architectural technologist by the name of Dustin Poole. And I shared it with Tony, and I wanted to share it with everybody today. This is actually a property that my wife and I own in Belleville, Ontario. It's a small town of about 57,000 people. It's the worst home in the best neighborhood. Does that make sense, Tony?
Yes.
It's the worst home in the best neighborhood. Old East Hill has homes that are 1 and 2 and maybe $2.5 million. Ours was like 400 grand. So this is what we bought. It's a 5-bedroom home facing the street. And then in a back-to-back, it is a duplex, but it's a back-to-back one. So, you've got doubles which are side to side, or townhomes which are side to side, and you've got duplexes which are above and below. This one is a back-to-back condition. So it has has a 5-bedroom home here and a 2-bedroom home here. And you can sort of see a detached garage in the back, right? And so when my wife and I bought it, the reason we got it so cheap was a little different from some of the stuff that Tony's doing, is that we have 2 tenants in there, lovely single moms, one with a big family in the front and one with a smaller family in the back, but they've been there forever and they're not moving anywhere and they don't pay much rent. So if you buy something like this in Ontario where there's rent control, you know, getting vacant possession is not easy. And we didn't ask for vacant possession, so we got it probably a few $100,000 below market because of that. We were helping out the sellers who were based in Toronto. But what I showed, what I said to my wife when we saw the house is we have these, it's a great duplex for 400 grand, and it has this detached garage in the back. You'll see it a little bit better here. There's the house in the front. Am I sharing the right screen, Tony? Am I sharing my screen?
Yeah, I can see the
You can
house.
see it. Okay, just in case I was sharing the other one. So you can see this is the 5-bedroom house here, and there's the 2-bedroom house in a back-to-back condition. Here is the detached garage. And you can see it a little bit more clearly here, a detached garage, and it's right on the property line. So one of the things when you're looking at something like this, you have to be careful because you can't actually tear this down and build a coach house in the backyard in the same location, because right on the property line, you would never be allowed to rebuild it. So this is a renovation. So when we apply for a building permit, it's a renovation, and there won't be much left of this, maybe a few 2x4s, but it's a renovation as opposed to a tear down and build new. That's a very important distinction. And this was just, I'm an engineer, not an architect. This was kind of the best that I can do. And I said, let's take this, detached garage. We'll put, just as Tony did with his design, we'll put you know, a door here and a bedroom here. We'll have a great room here, and we'll add something new. So this was the best that I can do as a lowly engineer. And this is what, in fact, Dustin, the architectural technologist, came up with. And we made a few changes to it. But Tony's on the right track. You come in this door here. This is the great room. You've got dining, living room, your kitchen. You've got a bedroom here with its own bathroom and its own walk-in closet. So you've got that, and it has access to the outside as well. And then this is the new construction. So this is the micro suite. It's a self-contained suite. And sometimes you call them studio apartments, bachelor apartment. I think in Quebec they call them efficiencies. And you can see, as Tony mentioned, it has its own door to the outside, which you can see here in red. That was pretty much the only change I made to Dustin's plans. I didn't want to have yet another door facing the street, so I just turned it 90 degrees. But you'll notice that then, exactly as Tony said, you can rent this as a 1-bedroom apartment, a 1-studio apartment, a 2-bedroom home. You could rent this on short-term rental and this long-term or vice versa. It gives you an incredible number of options over time. And just as we were going for building permit, we made one other change, Tony, and that is this window has now been replaced by yet another door, because we have a piece of yard back here, a little bit of garden back here, which was completely locked off basically by the building and by the back of the property. And we want to be able to access it as a patio. So design can be a really important part of animation, and giving yourself, you know, the more doors you create, micro suites you create, lock-off suites, studios, whatever, the more opportunities you have for different functional program, different types of leasing. All right, enough of that. Back to you, Tony.
I gotta say, yours, I think it's gonna be a bit bigger, so the layout looks really good. We would have had to apply for a variance, and I didn't want to. See, I love velocity. That's what, you know, I could be doing big multifamily deals that take forever. They take 2, 3, 4, 5 years. But we bought this property, and we got vacant possession, so we can go to work as soon as we have permits. We got the permits yesterday, so we've owned it for about 3 months. We're gonna break ground in a couple weeks. So start to finish, we're gonna be finished our construction project and have it tenanted out probably about 6 months from the day we purchased it. And you know, we could have applied for a variance to get a bigger coach house, but I didn't want to go through, because then we have to announce it to the neighborhood, and it's a whole big process that I just didn't want to, just for velocity purpose.
I can't agree with you more. One of the key things about real estate investing and real estate development, one of the key things for all of us to understand is, I mean, I'm amazed at how much Tony knows and how much he can teach us all. Velocity, I haven't used that word, but he's absolutely right. You take the quickest, fastest, least complicated route to revenues. And this is the first time that I've seen Tony's version of our coach house, and I love it, Tony.
Awesome. Thanks for the inspiration and the guidance there. So yeah, next slide, please. So yeah, so you've seen that next. So this is actually the interior of the property before we even did any renovations. So in this picture, you can see, like, you can find properties that are in great condition that are under market value if you know how to connect with sellers that need help. So it's not always buying a property that's needs to go back to studs, So next slide, please. Oh, yep. So as is right now, currently, we could have, this is just what it could look like now. I have the main floor here as 2,400 of potential income, but I have it currently rented out at 2,500 a month. So that, I'm already doing better than what we projected on this presentation. In the basement, if we were to rent it out right now, I have $1,600 on this slide, but when I went to Zumper the other day to check the average in that area, it's actually 1,800, 1,850 or something. So, and that shop in the back, if we did nothing to it, we could get $900 a month. There's shops in town, if you call a local storage place, that are the same size, same kind of amenities, they rent for $1,100 a month. And there's a waiting list to get into them, and people hold them generationally because they're in such high demand. So that's as is before we do the second phase of construction. Now to get, next slide, please. Now to get to that $1.4 million appraisal, we have to build that coach house in the back. And by the time we're done, we're going to have 3 units and 2 flexible units on top of that, like in the coach house, where you have the flex unit that can be put on Airbnb. So our aim is to get 2,500 upstairs, which is what we're getting right now. Then 1,600, 1,600, 1,600, 1,600 for a grand total of gross operating income of $8,300 per month. Now, if we just want to recoup that million, because we bought for 750 and we put 250, we're putting 250 into renovations. That's about $1 million of construction debt on the property. If we just wanted to refinance out of that and leave our seed money in the deal, this is what it would look like. However, if we went up to 85% loan to value, so at 74% with leaving our seed capital in, at a 7% interest rate, which is what my B lender and my commercial guys tell me we could get, there would be a cash flow of $1,300, a free cash flow of $1,340 per month, which represents a 5.33 cash on cash return. Now, if we wanted to pull seed capital out at the refinance, we would go to 85% loan to value, which I've been told that we could, maybe even up to 90. It depends on how things are looking at the time, but the higher loan to value you go, the lower the cash flow is going to be. So this was just kind of a balanced number. And I know Bruce likes to see 6% cash on cash. So we put it together this way, so it kind of met all those metrics, but we could actually pull out money at a refi if we were good with having less cash flow. Any questions? I know somebody said, somebody had a question about how are you going to get the revenues or something. Is there anything I can clarify there, or?
I think you've answered the questions that people have asked so far anyway.
Awesome. Cool. So if we look at it here on the 4 ways to win, which shows us the 4 profit centers in the deal. Starting, there's a little green box there. And in the green box, it says cash flow, 18,000, almost 19,000 per year of free cash flow after all expenses and mortgage. Principal recapture comes in the form of every time you pay a mortgage, every time the tenants pay us and we pay our mortgage with that, they're paying down part of our rent through amortization, or paying part of our debt down on the property through amortization. So over a year, that represents $7,000. Passive appreciation, I just put the Ontario average over the last 50 years in there. I know that right now maybe things aren't really appreciating the way they have been, but if we're in this for 3 to 5 years as a medium term buy and hold, it's realistic it could go back to normal rates, not the crazy rates, but the 3, 4, 5, 6, 7% appreciation. So and then on the active appreciation side, there's $363,000 of projected forced appreciation through strategic renovations. And so if you combine all of those 4 profit centers, you get the IRR, or the internal rate of return. And that is a total, there's a box here that says $488,000, and that represents 161 total combined ROI, or internal rate of return.
So a couple of things I should add here for everybody is I knew about 3 types of appreciation, but I learned from Tony as we were sort of rehearsing for this webinar that I had never done this before, which is separating out active and passive appreciation. I had to ask Tony, what the heck is that? And I really like it, actually. So I understand, I hope your properties will cash flow. You can make a little bit of money. Money, my wife calls money you can touch, feel, and spend. Very important. So hopefully you're making a little bit of cash every month. That's what the green box is. And then I understand the principal recapture. I call that, Tony, a wealth effect, because your tenants are paying your mortgage off for you. Who gets the benefit of that? Not the tenant, not the bank, you do. So I get that. But dividing passive and active appreciation, I thought was really clever. And what Tony means by passive appreciation, it means that as our cities get, there's more people coming to cities. There's a lot of immigration in the States and in Canada. These people need some place to live. And so generally speaking, real estate has gone up for hundreds of years. I mean, what would a cabin in the woods have cost in 1850? Maybe $100, maybe 50. I don't really know, but well, not very much. So as people crowd into urban areas, and you all know that whether you're talking the States or Canada, in fact, in most cities around the world, we're not making enough land available for development. As a result, there's a shortage both of rental accommodation and of houses for sale. So generally speaking, that general inflation or passive appreciation, as Tony calls it, is going to continue. You don't have to do anything. You just will go up. But if you, and this last bar here, which is the active appreciation, Tony, I call that due to the renovations as you talked about, but also due to the animation strategies that you're pursuing.
Right. So we would never get that after renovation appraisal. That appraisal might come out to 1.1 million if we didn't have the animation factor. So that's the key in all of that. And we learned that in your mastermind, Bruce. So thank you.
Well, thank you for that. One last thing, when Tony talks about this being internal rate of return, in principle, he's correct, okay? Internal rate of return takes into account everything. Your cap rate, which is your cash flow. It takes into account the pay down of the mortgage, the wealth effect. It takes into account, now I understand it a little bit better, both active and passive appreciation. It does. So the internal rate of return does, in fact, embrace all 3 returns. The cap rate measures only the cash flow. All right. And cap rates are very important in the business, whether it's residential, multiplex construction, or commercial construction, or mixed use, doesn't matter. That's very important to know what those cap rates are, but it only measures one thing. The internal rate of return measures 4 things. I used to say 3. Now I'm going to say 4 things that you see here. And that's what Tony's saying. But the actual calculation of the internal rate of return, what Tony did is he used a simple process of addition over 5 years, which is fine, but that's not actually, Tony, what the internal rate of return would show. It would show a different sort of, would show an annual number, and it's a little bit more complicated. We're not going to go through that today.
Right, we would have to annualize it. This is based on a 1 year. This is just looking at 1 year, but if this was over multiple years, we'd have to annualize it.
It's a little bit more complicated for everybody, but Tony's on the right track. But if you want to learn how to do internal rates of return properly, how to calculate them, that is a little bit more complicated. We can just move on.
Right, this is meant on a 1 year timeline,
Okay.
to refi and that sort of thing. Yeah, because this forced appreciation or the active appreciation comes in the first year. So that's when the biggest is, and then
Fabulous.
after that, there's a different calculation for the longer term.
Fair enough.
Yeah. So yeah, any questions about that or? Yeah. I don't mind skipping over these or just kind of going through these slides because, I have it in this is just the inputs to get that other graph, purchase price 7. I know we're going to spend about 250 as a, there's a $50,000 contingency in there for, when we're doing construction, if we go a little over budget, which things tend to do. Market value after appreciation or after improvements is 1.4. This is just more of the same that we saw on the other page, really. If we can
a couple of things stand out to me, Tony, and that is the appraisal fee is $2,000, not $500.
Right. So an income approached appraisal is much more expensive.
Much more expensive.
And she likes it when I call her to do them because it's a great payday for her.
We have a question from Ryan. How big is your team, and how do you cover the cost of your team?
Right, that's a great question. So we have a team of up to 10. Like, people come and go, and generally it hovers around 10. There's 2 of them are on this call today, and they're all amazing people that we couldn't do this without. And we spend about $30,000 a month on marketing to connect with these off-market sellers, and it takes a team of 10 answering phones all day, creating these presentations, and that sort of thing. So typically the overhead in our business we've been covering it through wholesaling deals. A lot of times when we get a property under contract, we can assign it. If it doesn't make sense for us and our investors, but it's still a good deal, we can assign it to another person and make, I think our average assignment fee is about $37,000. So just one assignment deal at $37,000 a month or covers our monthly overhead. Does that make sense?
It does. And if you think about it, Ryan, I am unlikely to set up a team of, I'm a sole practitioner, I have lots of people who help me, but I'm really on my own. So I'm very unlikely to have a team of 10 people, finding deals like this. But somebody like me, I would be perfectly happy to pay a $35,000 finder's fee for one deal like this that I could close. Maybe it's no money down, maybe it's $35,000 down, but that's a heck of a lot better than $200,000 down. And $35,000 is a reasonable opportunity cost for somebody my age, and I'm busy. So when Tony shows up with a deal like this, I can understand why people are saying, yeah, I'll take that deal just for myself and my group, and I'll pay you the $37,000 finder's fee.
Right. And so if I'm bringing you a deal where you're making $120,000 on equity on the buy, it makes sense. It's like putting a quarter in to make a dollar.
That's it. Yeah. I think it's fantastic, and as I said, there's very few opportunities like this that I could find on my own through a system like yours. I just couldn't do it. Ruben and Mary Lou, based in North Vancouver, are asking, because they have the same issue, because I coach Ruben and Mary Lou, and I understand the issue, and they're still having trouble grasping how we can convince lenders to accept appraisals at this level and it's maybe $100,000 or $200,000 more than you purchased. I know you've said you get an appraiser on site, but how do you actually convince the lender?
Hey, it was hard for me, even with 20 years in the business, hard to wrap my head around it when I got the green light from my lender. And he suggested this, and I couldn't really I couldn't believe it. So I kept asking 100 million, what if this happens? What if that happens?
Right.
And sure enough, it's but we're not dealing with A lenders, we're dealing with B lenders, private money. I mean, I'm always paying over the prime rate. Like, I don't even look at the rate. I'm looking at deals that to achieve these strategies,
Yeah.
I have to make sure it can break even at 10% interest rates, because that's, as long as the deal can cash flow neutral at 10%, we can make all of this happen. Does that answer the question, or?
Well, I'll ask Ruben. Ruben, does that answer the question? Just waiting for him to answer.
Sorry,
Yeah.
I think I missed something. Can you expand on that, please, a little bit?
Yeah.
The question is, the lenders normally will like us to have what they call the skin on the game, right? So if there is no down payment, how do they kind of look at the deal from that perspective? That was sort of my question.
Right. That's a great question. And there's a little bit, so there's a few elements there. One thing is credit, for sure. Our credit is in the 800s, so that's a big piece of it. And I'd say the construction background and the track record we have, they are comfortable with, and we've built that relationship over time. So I'd say coming into it, if you don't have the track record or your credit or whatever, it might take a few deals where you have to put money down. But once they see you've done this a few times, everything becomes easier. Like, when I close on properties now, they don't ask us, like, just sign a paper. I bring them an appraisal, I bring them the agreement of purchase and sale, and there's not much more beyond that. Whereas if you go to like a new mortgage broker for a property, there's all this like intake, and it's a whole process of filling out forms. So it's a process to get to that point with your lender.
So Tony, I'm not surprised you're getting kind of grilled on this, because Ruben and Mary Lou are have a national portfolio. They're in the commercial space, they're in the industrial space, they're in the multi-res space, and they're very successful, and they have a very good track record. But I get that question all the time for myself, for my clients, and certainly Ruben and Mary Lou get that too. Where's the skin in the game? I hear that endlessly. And so somehow or other, your mortgage broker, your appraiser, and your lenders have gotten past that. And what I'm afraid of is it might not be something we can replicate.
So my mortgage brokers and lenders understand that my skin in the game is that to get this deal through the door, we had to generate 200 leads, have 50 phone call conversations, and make 10 offers that all got rejected. And meanwhile, it's costing us $30,000 a month to do all this. So they understand. That's the other thing. You got to connect with a lender who understands your situation. And I knew my lender for a lot of years before we started doing this business together. So yeah, and he's also a real estate investor himself, building 300 houses right now. So I think that helps too. Yeah.
Okay. Well, Ruben, you and I and everybody else, we got a lot of work to catch up to Tony.
Yeah. Thank you, Tony.
Right. Yeah. No problem. I'm happy. Reach out anytime and we can talk about it. And I'm happy to
Tony, is it okay if I put your email address in the chat box for everybody?
Yep, for sure.
Thank you.
So funny enough, we made this slide before I got the good news of the building permits the other day. So for anybody that's on this group, on this call, I mean, this still stands, but on the next presentation I do, if the opportunity is still available, this will have gone up because we're now in an even better position where we have our construction financing approved, we've got our permits, we've got our drawings, we're basically ready to break ground. I have to get in touch with the builder on Monday to see when we're putting a shovel in the ground. I think it's going to be probably in the next week or two, because it takes a bit of time to mobilize and that sort of thing. So hypothetically, if an investor who wanted to be a passive investor and buy equity in the deal, they would invest $250,000 as an investment opportunity, and they would own 30% equity or 30% of the IRR, or both, I guess you could say. So when my mouse is not working now. Oh, I don't really need it, I guess. So basically, they invest 250,000, and at the end of the renovation, once we've realized that active or forced appreciation, their 30% share of that profit would equal $147,000, which represents 59% return on investment for just being passive. And I'm happy to also, I know there's a lot of new people getting into this, and I'm also happy to train people as we go through the process. So if they wanted to be like a invest and learn type of investor, we're all for it and happy to do that. Do you have any questions about that, Bruce?
Tony, is it okay if I jump in just for a second and show something that I think might be helpful?
Yep.
Stop sharing your screen here for a moment and just give me a second. So what I was thinking, Tony, is that you have, I think you have at least 4 or 5 of these deals on the go right now. Is that correct?
Yeah, on this slide deck, I have 4. We have 5, 5 or 6, but only 4 on this presentation.
Yeah, so Tony has a number of opportunities, and what I did this morning just to help Tony out, and I'm here as his coach, and you know, I coach about 2,500 people in the States and Canada, a few overseas, but mostly the US and Canada. And so what I did was I created something, and I'll share it with everybody. Just give me a second here when I figure out where I'm at. Yeah. So let me see if I can find it a little better version of it. Well, I'm going to give up in a second here if I can't find it. So just bear with me one more minute. Yeah, I have it here. Yeah, I did this for Tony this morning, fairly early, and yeah, I'll share my screen here. I'll move this out of the way. Oops, I'll try and move this out of the way. All right, I will get rid of that. So what I did was I created this expression of interest reservation agreement, and you got to remember I'm a lowly civil engineer, not a lawyer. So this is kind of written in English as opposed to legalese. But if you're interested in helping out, you know, either lending money to the project or one of Tony's projects, or participating as an investor, or both, there is an expression of interest reservation agreement. This expression of interest reservation agreement is between, you know, whoever you are and Tony as the founder, and he's in the process of acquiring investment property, and you're considering participating with them. So what it says is, if you're interested, you would actually complete this form and send it to Tony. Founder will make details of investment opportunities available to the investor within 5 business days. So he'd go through the details with it, because if we do all the details on this call, Tony will be here for a few more hours. And I promised everybody I wouldn't keep them for 4 hours. So I thought this would be a bit of a shortcut. So if you're interested, I'll put a link in here. You can actually download this form. If you're interested, you can sign it. And you can send it to Tony. You would put there would be a refundable reservation fee due, which is $1,500. It's just a good faith thing. Tony's going to share all of his numbers with you, and he's going to teach you how to do it yourself, perhaps. I thought it's a $1,500 refundable fee. which just shows your good faith that you're going to either lend money to one of his projects, or you're going to become an investor, or both. And then you have 15 business days. You basically have 3 weeks to go through your own due diligence, see if you like what's going on. If you don't, you get your $1,500 back without interest, deduction, or penalty. And you can sign this electronically if you want, and Tony can sign it as well. And there's Tony's contact information. I also put it in the chat box so you can reach out to him directly. You don't have to reach out through this form. And I'm going to put the Dropbox link for the form in the chat box too. Bear with me for one more minute. Oh my goodness, where is the chat box? Well, I'll figure it out, guys, before we end this call. And then, you know, you date it, sign it, and then Tony has to sign it, and off you go. What I really appreciate from Tony on this whole deal is the fact that he is prepared not only to, you know, make some of his deals available to our group and a larger group than this, but he's also willing to teach us how to do it. Like, that is a very generous pay it forward kind of thing that Tony has done. And for somebody like me, I haven't been able to do it systematically. I certainly haven't been able to get that missing link that I've been talking about over and over again, which is getting the appraised value where it should be. I've really struggled with that, and I continue to struggle with it, but I think I might do a little bit better now.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. Did you want to end it here and save the other ones for another time, or go into another?
It depends on the folks here. It is now 90 minutes in. I'm willing to stay. I just didn't want to keep everybody forever. One thing I would like you guys to do, though, is to make sure you copy Tony's contact information out of the chat box, because once this presentation is finished and we end it, the chat box will go away. So please copy Tony's contact information out of the chat box. Please also copy the link to that reservation agreement. If you really want some coaching from Tony, you want to maybe learn more about this, you want to participate in one of his deals, see how it goes, I think you should reach out to him, and you've got a copy of that reservation agreement. The other thing I did was I did put in here, something for you to download, the free handbook. And I did promise everybody, Tony, one other thing, or a couple of other things, which I'll also put in the chat box. And then I'm coming back to you, Tony. So hang on a second.
No worries.
And there were two other, just bear with me, guys. There were two other things that I thought would help everybody. These are a couple of handbooks I've written. I only have, let me just make it a little bigger. I only have one addiction. And it's not to drugs or alcohol, it's to writing. And I just asked my wife, I like to write. There's no doubt about it. And so there's two other things I'll put in the Dropbox for you guys. I wrote this, it's probably a couple of years ago now, maybe even 3 years ago now, but it's still pretty useful. It's called Business Model Illustrations, Real Estate Investment and Personal Business for Life Mini Case Studies. It's only 67 pages long. Some of the stuff I've written is much longer. It has 10 case studies in it. 7 of them are real estate and 3 are business ones. You don't have to read the business ones unless you're interested in that. But I think you should read it because it has a lot of the animation ideas in it that Tony and I have been talking about today. Mostly Tony's been talking about it. And then this other thing that my students and I did quite a few years ago now is we put together wonderful quotes, about 1,000 of them or 1,200 of them. If you ever get depressed, sometimes entrepreneurs like us, we're on our own. There's not too many people around who really understand entrepreneurs, and certainly nobody wants to hear us complain anyway. So we put together 1,000 quotes. You don't have to read it all at one sitting, but if you're getting a bit down, here's just one of them. Whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. Henry Ford, right? There's like I said, there's about 11 or 1,200 quotes in there, and I will put that in the chat box, and you guys can copy those links out and download them if you want. All right, Tony, back to you.
Awesome. My mouse died, of course, right on the webinar. So how does everybody feel? Do we want to look at 1 or 2 more deals, or come back for another episode?
I saw some people looking for more.
Yeah, that's Mike, our lead. That's our guy who lives in Brazil, our American guy who we got answering the phones, who's doing an amazing job getting these deals under contract.
I was gonna say, we got the meat and potatoes coming up. You definitely want to see these ones if you like the other one.
That's why we pay you the big bucks, Mike.
So Tony, if it's okay with everybody, we're not going to do 4 hours, but how about we do one more? Would that be okay?
Sure. Yeah.
All right, let's do one more. I'd like that too. I mean, I'm really enjoying it. I just, it is Saturday, and I didn't want folks to go on too long. Now I got to find out what did I do with your presentation. Oh my gosh.
Somebody asked me, I can see in the chat, have I considered Costa Rica? So for a period of time, I was living, like when I was a sailboat captain, at one point I arrived to South America and I decided to live on land in South America for a while after sailing. And there's a lot of failing businesses down there. I'm just going to quickly touch on that. There's a lot of failing businesses down there. And so seller and bank financing is not available. So seller financing is the big thing. And I acquired a 50-unit hotel on seller financing, which we converted into a backpackers hostel and a nightclub, a bar, a backpackers hostel, a restaurant, and an Airbnb all in one. And it was great cash flow, like insane cash flow, but a very hard business to scale. So if I was at the point in my life where I wanted to go down to another country and have a job there, I would pursue that. But I wouldn't consider investing anywhere outside of Canada or USA for growth purpose or for that would be like just a bonus little project on the side. Anything outside of the North America.
All right, so one slide we didn't deal with, which we should now, and just so everybody knows, I did put in the chat box the extra handbooks that I promised you. If you want them, copy them out of the chat box, and they're yours. So the exit strategy, Tony, and then we'll go to the next case study.
Right. So the aim would be to pull investors' capital out through refinancing within 1 year, maybe 2, depending on how it goes and construction and that sort of thing. And we would like to hold the property for 3 to 5 years and then either sell it, dispose of it, or refinance it again and keep it for the long term. But there is some flexibility there to make it a win-win for everybody on timeframes and that sort of thing. Does that answer the question? I think we lost Bruce. Does anybody else have any? So from Ruben, and do you keep the sorry, let me find the chat here. So I'm just going to answer a question while we wait for Bruce to come back. Oh, you're back.
I apologize, Tony, but my gardener showed up and he's cutting the grass and my window was open. I thought I was going to drown out you and everybody else. So I just shut the window. Okay, guys, I apologize. Yeah, there is another question in the chat box. Do you keep the investors as owners? This is a great question, Ruben. Do you keep the investors as owners after the refinance?
Right. So I think what he's asking is about equity and owning that sort of thing. So there is an option. There's a few different options. One is a promissory note if somebody didn't want to be on title for whatever reason. But the other option is opening a holding company together that holds the property and everybody owns their respective equity, like proportionate to they would own shares in that holding company proportionate to the how do you explain it? The split, the shares. But there is one thing with that. Right now, I own these properties. So if we go that route, we have to transfer the properties into the holding company name, which does, we have to pay land transfer tax, points to the lenders. There is a few things with that, right? I mean, yeah. So anyways, that's one option for sure.
So Ruben, really what Tony is saying, like most entrepreneurs, is he's flexible. Some people prefer just to be lenders And if somebody says, look, I'm going to lend money to the project, I like it. Tony has said he'll provide a minimum return of 8% a year of simple interest, non-compounded interest, or 30% of the total return on investment, including cash flow and all the appreciation and mortgage pay down over a period of up to 5 years. So some people will just want to lend money. They're more comfortable with debt. And they'll get a promissory note for that. Reason that Tony wants to use a promissory note instead of putting, somebody on title, whether it's a mortgage or it's an actual ownership, is that when people are on title, they also have to sign the mortgage. And for a lot of people, they don't want that additional responsibility. So there has to be a lot of trust though here, Ruben, as you know, you've done it. I know some of your deals, you've done it. There is a lot of trust involved, but you shouldn't be doing deals with anybody you don't trust anyway. People often ask me about non-disclosure agreements. I'm not a big fan. And the reason I'm not a big fan is if I trust somebody, I say, look, Ruben or Mary Lou or Mike or Tosh or Tony, will you please keep this confidential? And they say yes, and that's fine for me because I trust these people. If you don't trust them and you have them sign an NDA, it doesn't mean anything. They're not going to pay any attention, and they're going to, and they're going to breach that confidentiality agreement in a second. So trust is the number one thing in life. But if people want to own part of it, they want to own 30% of it, or 40%, or 25%, or 10%, whatever it might be, Tony's open to that. So that's a very typical entrepreneurial approach. So the reason we're doing this is to introduce you to Tony, his strategies. And then if you're going to do any sort of deal, you have to have a discussion directly with Tony. That's why I kept putting his information in the chat box.
Right. Yeah. And so when they do come on title, there's also other factors, their credit, and a few different things like that. So there's ways to workarounds if somebody wants to invest, but they don't have great credit. There's ways if they have great credit, how they can add that to the deal. So, there's creative solutions, and I'm happy to talk to anybody. And I see from Ruben there, yes, we do use joint venture agreements. Yeah.
All right, so let's do one more, Tony, which is Harrow, Ontario, option A without Airbnb.
Yes, so this one, Mike, who's on the call, actually scored this deal for us, and I have to give him credit because he, when I go to these masterminds and they say for wholesaling purpose, you want to find guys that have car sales background. They've tried all kinds of different types of sales backgrounds, like medical tool sales and this and that, and none of them are as good as car sales. So when Mike told me he had a car sales background, I was like really, really excited. And same with Gabrielle, who's on this call. So he put his skills to work, and he got this one for $260,000. Okay. And when I initially they told me, I wasn't really that excited, because I know in that area I can pick up just a building lot for $150,000, and I just had it in my head the seller's probably out to lunch. The house probably needs to be torn down, and it's going to cost me more to tear it down. I could just buy a vacant lot. Was I ever surprised when I actually got out there? You drive down the block. It's 30 minutes from Windsor. It's actually 20 minutes. I've done it to Windsor. And when you drive down the block, you're driving down a block where there's $1 million homes. So great comparables all around. And it's a block from less than a block, maybe half a block from the water, from the beach. Beautiful little neighborhood. Then I get to the house, and the house is perfectly fine. It's move-in ready now. It could be sold on MLS, or, so there's a lot of value there. And the as-is appraised value was $410,000. So that represents $150,000 purchase price below the appraised value. So we'll go to the next slide, please. Location, you can see there, the little red pin above the house. It's, what is that, 5, 6, 7 houses from the water. Beautiful little neighborhood. There it says 40 minutes to Windsor, but I've done it in 20 minutes. It's not, and people do commute to Windsor for work. So it is a town that has access to Windsor for jobs and that sort of thing. Can we go to the next slide, please? So yeah, so our purchase was $150,000 below the appraised value, which was a 36.5%. When you ask, where's my skin in the game? That's my skin in the game. 36% below appraised value. So this one, actually, we were able to get from our mortgage broker $360,000. So we got paid $100,000 to close on this
It's
property.
incredible, Tony. I mean, I haven't seen deals like this since the 1980s. Can I ask you a question? When I'm looking at this aerial photograph, how big is this lot? Do you know?
It's huge. It's like I think 12,000 square feet.
Yeah, it's big. And what are all these outbuildings over here?
They've got to go. They're actually, this is I know generally when there's outbuildings, like they're grandfathered in and that, but in this case, they actually have to be torn down, and they're just sheds. There's not any value to them for coach houses and that sort of thing.
And is this on well and septic, or is it pipe services?
City, everything, city water, city sewer.
So one of the things that when I look at a property like this, that's 1 or 2 blocks from the beach, I think about theming this. I mean, people love kayaking. What is the water body right there? Is that a river?
I'm from BC, and I don't know.
You don't know. Yeah,
I don't know the lakes off the top of my head.
Yeah. It's okay. All right, let's keep
Yeah.
going here. I really love the idea of being able to close on a property. Ruben, this is amazing to me, to close on a property and have the lender pay you $100,000, or what was it on your closing? How much did you get?
$360,000.
Yeah,
So,
but I mean, how much cash did you get? You got $100,000, I guess.
oh yeah, sorry. Purchase $100,000 in addition to the purchase price.
Yeah. I mean, that's really fantastic. Okay, keep going.
Right. So after speaking with our appraiser, same appraiser that did the other one, same lender, same everything, she seems to think that when we build so this one's also legally zoned for a coach house in the back. If you can see in this picture, there's a garage there. We're not going to convert it. We're actually going to tear it down, and that's where the coach house is going to go. And after renovation value, she thinks it's going to be higher than 850. She even set up into the 1 million, 1.1, but I'm going super conservative on this. And we put an after renovation value of 850,000. So we have a purchase price of 260,000, and it's going to cost us about 200,000 in renovations. But you can see I have 300,000 there as renovation cost, because built into that is that 100,000 that we were paid to close on the property. So all in all, we will have bought for 260. We will have spent 300,000 on renovations. So we'll be into it for, what is that, 560, and refinancing based on a cap rate at 850,000. And by the way, there's a house that's quite comparable in this case, with an auxiliary dwelling unit across the street. So there's this one, there's even better grounds to support our after renovation value. Yeah. So this one, same thing, very similar coach house. You can see, we already went over this on the last one, but the same sort of coach house where you can rent both sides separately or rent it as one, and it's going to be just about the same size as the other one, around 800 square feet, if I remember correctly.
So Tony, I don't see on this plan here where the lock-off suite is, where the second unit is.
Yeah, because you don't see the exterior door. Is that why?
Well, I see the living room, dining room, kitchen. I see the bedroom here.
So So it's 2 bachelor suites, and that bedroom that you were hovering over,
Yeah,
there's
yeah, this one?
actually there's a sliding door that goes to the exterior.
Okay, right here, I think.
Yeah, so that's where,
Oh, okay, all right, so I can see it now. So what Tony has done, I wasn't clear on it, now I am, is he's really basically created 2 bachelors, 2 studios.
right,
Yeah, I got it.
right. So, the numbers we looked at on the slide before were with no Airbnb. Can we just go back there for a second? So if we just rented the 2 houses separately as 2 houses at market rents, that's about 2,500 each. And, you know, if we refi at a 65% loan to value and not pull capital out, it's still, you know, it's not a great cash flow. It's still a deal in Southern Ontario that has cash flow at market rents. It's not like a screaming huge one, but it's kind of decent. So the opportunity here, though, is in Airbnb. So if we can go to the next 2 slides over.
And Michael in BC knows Ontario better than I do. He says the lake is Lake Erie. Sorry about that.
Right, it's adjacent to Leamington, so
Yeah, Lake Erie. Absolutely. Okay, thank you, Michael.
Okay. So this is with the cash flow and forced. So okay, sorry, I can barely see the screen.
Oh,
Can
I'm
everybody
sorry.
see this good? Yeah.
Are you having trouble? I should put it full screen on. That's my fault. I'm doing a horrible job today. All right, sorry.
There we go. Okay. So this one, if we look at the internal rate of return, without Airbnb, there's almost 6,000 a year of free cash flow, 6,000, just a little over 6,000 of principal recapture through the pay down of the mortgage.
Right.
Passive appreciation, 59,000 if we look at the long term, that's yearly. And then enforced appreciation, $290,000.
Tony, can I ask another question?
Yep.
So on this one, you know, I'm a buy and hold guy, as you know, but I had a bit of a come to Jesus moment last year, and I think it was last year. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was in 2021. Yeah, I reread one of Robert Kiyosaki's books, Fast Money Beats Slow Money. And I actually, and some people on this call know, I reread it. I think I read it 3 times because Robert's teachings are a little bit more subtle than I thought, and I had to read it a few times to understand it. What does he mean by fast money beats slow money? What he meant was there are some properties that you buy, you animate them, renovate them, whatever, you bring them to their highest and best use. And they kind of get to they go up in value and they get to kind of a plateau. And maybe they're not producing a whole lot of cash flow, but maybe they're breaking even or doing a bit better, which is, you know, okay. But what he was trying to get at, I think that was a 2012 book, so about 10 years ago that Robert wrote it. What he's trying to get at is that if you look at your portfolio, say you have 10 buildings, you're going to have at least 1 or maybe 2 that have kind of got to the plateau. They're probably not going to appreciate a whole lot more, and they're producing some cash flow, but maybe not great cash flow. Those you might sell. Take the money and buy a property that will appreciate more and will produce more cash flow. He's really not talking about flipping. He's talking about trading or trading up. So the reason I point that out is on this one, when you get that kind of active appreciation, which is making up almost 92% of the return, maybe after a year, this is when you sell.
Right. Right. You have to look at if it's matured and if it makes sense to sell. And certainly, I mean, if it makes sense, at some point you have to look at that option. Has it matured properly, and is it the time to sell? Yeah. Yeah. I think there was a question from Bob and Melanie here. So what was the question? I saw it go over the screen.
What it says, I already answered it, by the way, so I'm going to take this one. Melanie and Bob asked, being so close to the lake is great, but would there not be issues renting an Airbnb during the winter in a small town like that? There are. Airbnb can be quiet in the winter, depending on the theme. And I wanted to tell everybody that I have a client who has a 1-bedroom cabin in the middle of nowhere in Quebec, in Wakefield, Quebec, literally in the middle of nowhere. And she bought the place for about $310,000. And she was told by her realtor that she could get maybe $900 or $1,000 a month for it. She did not think that was a very good ROI. So she called up the coach, me. And I said, do you know anything about Airbnb? She said, really not much. And I said, well, I know a little bit. I'll teach you a bit about it. So she put it on her 1-bedroom log cabin on Airbnb, and she themed it. And what she did was she themed it as a romantic getaway. And Melanie, the worse that the weather gets, the more booked up she is. Because, you know, one thing that Quebec and Ontario has is they both have terrible weather, at least 6 months of it. And, you know, so when she themed it as a romantic getaway, leave the kids at home, people see that it's a lovely little cabin. She's done a fabulous job with it. They say, to heck with this, grandma come and, or grandpa come and look after the kids. Honey, we're going to it's called Cabin Faubert. She makes between $5,000 and $6,000 a month, Melanie and Bob, from that, not $900 a month, but $5,000 to $6,000, which is a very significant change in her circumstances. And like I said, the worse the weather gets in January, February, the more booked up she is. The other thing that I've seen work really well is people who have property on or close to, you know, bodies of water, rivers, lakes, what have you, bays. Believe it or not, ice fishing. One of my clients has I think he has 62 or 64 ice fishing huts that he puts out near properties he owns. He gets people from Germany. He gets people from Korea. They come and they rent his. Mind you, they're beautiful ice fishing huts. They've got internet and they got bunks, and you know you can rent them for 4 days. He makes a whole business out of it. So there are things you can do. It's called programming, things that you can do with theming and programming to keep your Airbnbs busy. But Tony, let's go on to what you did with Airbnb on this
Right.
slide.
Right. And so when we check the Airbnb, the AirDNA data, and what AirDNA does, it averages it out over the year. So you may get more at one time a year than the other, but it gives you an average. And I've also spoken to Airbnb arbitrageurs who, like, they rent from you and they do the Airbnb, and sort of ran the numbers with them. And so this is an option. I mean, we see it works with market rents as 2 separate houses, but this is another option. If we can, you know, use it as an option, it could be great. So I don't think this is the Airbnb. This is without Airbnb. I think we go to the next slide. So I guess, yeah.
Is this the Airbnb one? Yeah.
That's the
Okay,
Airbnb.
sorry about that, guys. Here we are. I caught up.
Yeah.
I'm really not doing a great job for you, Tony. I apologize.
No, you're doing great. Awesome. So next
I should
slide.
be a little smoother.
Yeah. Next slide. Next one. Next one. Okay, so based on the research we've done, it seems like it averages out of $2,800 per month over the year. And that's for 1-bedroom units that are renting on Airbnb. So let's say we had 3 units at $2,800 per month. That's a gross operating income of $8,400. Now, if we refinance at 65% loan to value with a 7% interest rate, that could be a 15% cash on cash return, or up to $4,000 a month in free cash flow.
Oh, that's really great.
Is that what you're getting up in Belleville, or
So
in your?
I'm glad you asked that, because again, you know, everybody, I'm really glad Tony has decided to share his slides with us and his expertise with us, because your coach can learn something too, and I am. Thank you again. So as I mentioned earlier on the presentation, Tony, I'm in a big argument, and it is in the Belleville property. I'm in a big argument with the appraiser. The appraiser said, look, that's very nice that you've got 3 Airbnbs out of your 12 units, but we're not going to consider $1 of Airbnb income from those 3 suites in your appraisal. It's your business income, nothing to do with real estate. I don't agree with that, but that is the policy that this particular appraiser is taking. So maybe I should just simply say you're fired.
I have an appraiser for you. That's next, a hard next. Yeah, you're fired for sure. Yeah.
I think I might do that. I mean, Tony, if you feel comfortable sharing your appraiser with me, you would be my new best friend.
Right. Certainly, I'm happy to share. And yeah.
But what Tony is saying is that he feels comfortable and confident that he can get Airbnb income. And at some point, guys, at some point, the lenders will change, because something Tony said earlier in this presentation is that the lenders have come around now, even on the residential side, where you have a duplex or a triplex, or you have a duplex with a coach house in the backyard. They're now thinking for residential, not just to rely on comparables, but also to look at appraising on an income basis. So in the last 2 or 3 years, the appraisers have come a long way, but we haven't quite got them there. At least I haven't been able to get them there on the Airbnb thing.
Right. And so I'm always just looking at leasing it out to somebody who will run the Airbnb and just getting leases in place. So my conversation with the appraiser is based on the leases we have in place.
That's very smart.
Yeah. So this one, I think if we go to the next slide, next slide. It's a lot of the same because they're 2 of the same presentations. Did we want to talk about the opportunity? Is that
Sure, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so this one's also open for investment opportunity, and it's a smaller investment than the one before of 190,000 for a 30% equity share. And based on our projections, that would be a 63% ROI, or a return of $120,671.
Tony, would it be okay if, say, 2 people decided to split the 190,000 between them, or is that you just want one person?
We're open to making a win-win for everybody, so there's some flexibility there. That's the great thing about this business, is we can be creative and pivot and create win-wins all around. So we're open to discussions. Yeah.
Somebody asked earlier too, if they have some RRSP funds, can they somehow participate in this?
Yes, we can certainly have a conversation about that. Yep, absolutely. That would be more of a private lending thing though, because it has to be the presentation we showed was for a joint venture, but RSP money would have to be, I'm happy to discuss the details behind that. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not an expert either in RRSP funding, but I know a little bit about it. And RRSP funding, there's some good news and there's some bad news. The good news is that with RRSP lending, you can go up to very close to 100% loan to value financing. So certainly 90% and certainly possibly 95% loan to value. So you can really get very high loan to value if you want. I don't know about everybody on the call here, but my RRSP investments have been basically horrible. I had $1 million of cash with the CIBC private bank during one of the stock market booms, I think 95 to 2000, where the stock market was booming, the .com thing back then. And in 5 years, the CIBC private bank managed to turn my $1 million in mutual funds in RRSPs with the bank into $920,000. So it was about a -2% a year. Now, skill testing question for you, Tony. At -2% a year, how long does it take to double your money?
Right.
Never. You never
Never, ever.
It's ridiculous. So after 5 years of investing with the CIBC, I fired them, and I said, I'm going to take it over myself. And so what I did was I took my 920,000 and I started doing private lending, right? And I was getting anywhere from 7 or 8% on a first mortgage deal to maybe 11 or 12% on a second mortgage. I have a second mortgage, by the way, on a chicken coop. A young fellow I know was building a chicken coop in his backyard, and I loaned him a little bit of money, a very nice chicken coop, by the way. And, you know, so, you know, I was getting anywhere from 7 or 8% to as high as 11 or 12%. And I've been doing that now for, well, I guess 20 plus years. And it's been a lot better than leaving it to the private bank to handle. So you can go up to 90 or 95% loan to value, but it has to be, Tony, it has to be in the form of a mortgage, at least from what I know. It can't be, you can't lend money from your RRSP, at least I don't think so. So my self-directed RRSP lending has been in the form of mortgages, not promissory notes. So you could do it, and it could be on a second mortgage, or it can be a first mortgage, but I think it has to be a registered mortgage.
Yeah, we can certainly do that here. It's doable, but
It's doable, yeah. And it's a very, very, very useful thing to do, at least if you're, I mean, listen, if you've got a great financial advisor and you're making 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12% with your RRSPs, you know, that's great. But most of us, I find, are not doing that.
that's
And
why
Ruben has commented here, the RRSP has to be lent on second or first mortgage through a company like Olympia Trust. Yeah, absolutely. So you have to have a third party hold the funds and the mortgage. But that's a technical detail, but it can be done. And certainly if you have RRSPs and you're not doing very well with it, I have found it's a very useful thing to do. Tony, it's been a wonderful, wonderful presentation. Do you have anything else you'd like to add?
just that, you know, thank you to everybody for taking the time on Saturday, you know, spending your time with us. And I'm always open to, if people want to reach out and just run a deal by me or talk about these deals or anything, any way I can add value, I'm always happy to touch base with people. Yeah.
Yeah, and I would strongly recommend you guys study up a little bit, because real estate is a wonderful business. I did some original research a few years ago now, and I looked at the 100 richest families in Canada. I found that 61 out of 100 had all or substantially all of their investments in real estate. Think about that. And it's probably similar, very similar in the States, very similar in Mexico, certainly in Europe. And so one of the things I would say is it can be a wonderful way for most of us to access real long-term wealth, not just for ourselves, but for our children and our grandchildren. So I want you to do that, but I also want you to realize that the idea of passive income and no work, that's misleading. Real estate, like every other business, requires work, knowledge, and effort. And Tony certainly is putting in the effort. Think about that. He's spending $30,000 a month to find these wonderful deals for people like us to maybe participate in. So we got a lot to learn. I want to thank everybody. If you want to reach back to me, if you want a copy of this recording, because we have recorded it, I'll upload it to YouTube. It will be unlisted though, so don't post it anywhere. Don't spam it out to a million people. It's just for the people on the call. And I appreciate everybody participating today. I'll see you all. Have a great rest of your weekend.
Bye. Thank you. It was great.
Thanks, Jessica.
Thank you,
Bye,
Tony.
Dan.
Thank you, Bruce.
Bye,
Thank you.
Ruben. Bye, Marilyn.
Thank you, Bruce.
Thanks,
Thank
Tony.
you, Tony.
Thank you.
Bye,
Yeah.
Thank
everybody.
you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you,
Great
Tony.
job, guys.
Yep.